Today, I'm bringing you the story of a woman who's closely tied to the political elite in the US and who, by sheer coincidence, happens to be one of the best investors of recent years. Her name? Nancy Pelosi. And her track record of financial success might not just be a fluke. My team and I have investigated Pelosi's public trades, her controversies, and her investment philosophy. For example, just a month before Congress passed a law that would benefit Nvidia, Pelosi invested $5 million into the company. Coincidence? In this video, we're going to uncover who Nancy Pelosi really is, whether she's taking advantage of insider information from her political position, and most importantly, how you can replicate her investment portfolio. So let's get into it. Nancy Pelosi is an 85-year-old politician born in Baltimore into a family with strong political roots. Her father was both a mayor and a congressman. But what really makes her fascinating is the double life she's been leading for decades. Politically, she's been a member of the US House of Representatives continuously since 1987. In 2007, she made history by becoming the first woman to lead the House, a role she held for 4 years and resumed again in 2019. She also played a key role in the landmark healthcare reform that led to Obama's Medicare program. Financially, however, and this is where it gets particularly interesting, she's an absolute money-making machine. Despite never earning more than $223,500 a year in her official role, her net worth has soared to over $260 million by 2025. That's a four-fold increase in less than a decade. Now, if you're wondering, no, she didn't inherit this fortune. She didn't win the lottery, and she didn't found a startup either. The bulk of this growth comes from stock market investments made alongside her husband, Paul. And do you know what else? Nancy Pelosi has never worked on Wall Street. She's never run a hedge fund. Yet somehow in 2023 she achieved an estimated 65% return, outperforming professional investors like Warren Buffett and even beating the Nasdaq, which had one of its best years at 55%. Now, to be fair, it's worth noting that it's not easy to calculate the exact annual returns for politicians like her. That's because the trades aren't reported with precise dates, so these figures are always rough estimates. To put things into perspective, if you'd invested $10,000 by copying Nancy Pelosi's trades in 2023, you'd now have around $16,500. Meanwhile, an investment in the S&P 500 would have left you with approximately $12,190. In other words, Pelosi nearly doubled her wealth. And 2023 wasn't a one-off. Over the past 9 years, her net worth has increased by nearly 300%, making it 4 times her original fortune. But here's where things start to get really interesting. These extraordinary returns have consistently lined up with legislative decisions that directly impact the very companies she invests in. So, are we looking at the greatest trader in history, or is there something else going on behind the scenes? Let's start with the most obvious question. Aren't politicians supposed to be banned from trading stocks because of, insider information? Well, in the United States, the land of freedom and capitalism, that's not quite the case. And here's the surprising part. All of this is completely legal. Contrary to what many people believe, US politicians are allowed to invest freely in the stock market. The Ethics in Government Act of 1978 and the Stock Act of 2012 only require them to disclose their trades. They don't stop them from investing in companies they're actively legislating on. It's a bit like a referee being allowed to bet on the outcome of a match while calling the fouls. And it's not just Pelosi. A staggering 97% of Congress members invest in the stock market. And a 2023 study published in the Journal of Financial Economics found that on average they outperformed the market by around 12% per year. So the real question is, are we dealing with a system that quietly allows the powerful to get even richer by using information that the average citizen doesn't have access to? Let's take a look at 3 specific trades made by Pelosi where the timing was so perfect, the amounts invested so precise, and the profits so extraordinary. That is hard not to wonder if she had access to information you and I could never dream of seeing. In July 2022, while the semiconductor market was going through a rough patch, Nancy Pelosi and her husband made an unusually large move, even by their standards. They invested $5 million in call options on Nvidia stock. Just 29 days later, the US Congress passed the CHIPS Act, a law that allocated $52 billion in subsidies to the American semiconductor industry. One of the biggest beneficiaries? You guessed it, Nvidia. Well now, what a remarkable coincidence. Nvidia's stock surged by 19% in the 2 weeks following that trade. The timing? Absolutely perfect. If you'd copied that trade with just $1,000, you'd have made $190 in just 14 days. That's a 19% return, which annualized works out to over 400%. But the Nvidia case isn't some one-off. Far from it, in fact. As we already know, in 2021, Pelosi was Speaker of the House, the very body that oversees and regulates the federal budget, including defense contracts. On March 19th of that year, Paul Pelosi, Nancy's husband, bought millions of dollars worth of Microsoft shares. Then, on the 31st of March, just days later, Microsoft announced it had secured a nearly $22 billion contract to supply the US Army with its HoloLens augmented reality headsets. These high-value defense contracts undergo a thorough review and budget approval process in Congress, which is responsible for overseeing and allocating funds for major military initiatives. And Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House at the time, played a significant role in that process. What makes this case so extraordinary is that Pelosi's success rate with her trades outperforms even the analysts at Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. But here's the crucial difference. Unlike them, she has access to legislative information that can directly impact the companies she invests in. Under US law, insider trading is defined as using material non-public information to trade stocks. It is illegal unless the information is made public or is not considered material. And this is where we find ourselves in a complex legal grey area. The Stock Act of 2012, signed by Obama, explicitly prohibits members of Congress from using non-public information they've gained through their work for personal investments. But here's the fundamental issue. How can you prove that an investment was based on insider information rather than good old-fashioned market analysis? While people are examining charts, reading balance sheets, and analysing trends, lawmakers have private meetings with CEOs, access to confidential government reports, and advanced knowledge of regulations that could impact entire industries. A 2023 study from the Journal of Financial Economics showed that Congress members' portfolios outperformed the market by an average of 12.3% per year. It would be pretty naive to think that these successful trades are simply down to market analysis. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. The system that was supposed to prevent abuse has accidentally created a unique opportunity for everyday investors. The law mandates that Congress members report their trades publicly within 45 days. And while this system was designed to prevent misuse, its unintended side effect is that anyone can now access this information. Think about it like this. If you knew for certain that it was going to rain tomorrow, wouldn't you take an umbrella? Following Pelosi's investments is similar. You're using publicly available information to make better decisions. We've just seen how Nancy Pelosi has achieved extraordinary results with investments that conveniently align with key legislative decisions. Now, here's the part that could directly help you. We will see the exact stocks in Nancy Pelosi's portfolio, the patterns she follows when selecting them, and most importantly, how her moves can be tracked in real time right from a phone. Because regardless of what we think about the ethics of this system, there's one undeniable truth. The information is out there, it's legal to use, and anyone who isn't taking advantage of it is playing at a disadvantage on a tilted playing field. Even though she's not professionally involved in the financial world, we can clearly identify Nancy Pelosi's investment philosophy, thanks to the legal requirement for her to report her stock trades. The first thing that stands out is that she doesn't put all her eggs in one basket. Pelosi opts for a diversified portfolio, covering multiple sectors and assets to reduce the overall risk. But what's particularly interesting is her focus on one specific sector: technology. Her most recent and profitable investments are in tech companies, especially those related to semiconductors and digital infrastructure. In fact, some of her latest purchases include stocks in companies like Nvidia and Broadcom Inc. What's more, many of these tech firms are based in California, the state she represents. Additionally, the majority of her most profitable investments are in companies that land significant federal contracts or benefit from regulatory advantages. So, if you were to replicate Nancy Pelosi's current portfolio, which companies should you be looking at? According to her latest filings, here are some of the key holdings in her portfolio right now. Nvidia, one of her most controversial and profitable investments. As we saw in 2022, Pelosi invested around $5 million just before the CHIPS Act was approved, and by January 2025, she had increased her holdings in the company. Google, undoubtedly one of her most recent high-value purchases, likely due to the low valuation multiples the stock is trading at. The latest reports indicate she also took advantage of January to increase her position. Microsoft. Remember back in 2021 when her husband bought shares just days before the $22 billion military contract for HoloLens was announced? Palo Alto Networks. A leader in cybersecurity, this investment highlights her focus on specialized technology sectors rather than just the big players in the tech world. Tempus. This AI sector company has been another big bet for her this quarter. As you can see, following Nancy Pelosi's moves isn't as tricky as it might seem. It's true that official reports can be published up to 45 days after the trade, by which time the stock price may have already jumped. But many of these stocks have tended to keep rising even after that 45-day window. And if you don't fancy spending hours digging through filings, there are two main ways to track her portfolio. First, there's the verified Nancy Pelosi stock tracker account on X, or formerly known as Twitter. And then there's Unusual Whales, which monitors trades from high-profile investors. So if you want to invest like Pelosi and potentially benefit from her gains, all it takes is staying on top of these sources. And with that being said, that will be all for today. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel for more content like this, and I will see you in the next video.